Get back to work. Song request on, not anymore. We're doing coaching now. Alright, hang tight, hang tough. In advance, I won't be shouting out stuff if there are people subbing and donating and shit during the coaching. What else? Twitch alerts is fucked anyway. I'm kind of grumpy, so I'm trying to channel gentleness right now. Ass poop, shit, fuck, damn, God, what the hell? Okay, I feel better. Okay, I feel good now. Let's go. Alright, everyone give it up for TBOBAGGINS. What's up, dude?
How's it going, man?
Oh, you know. Poop. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Hanging in there. So, there was a patch, and we kind of discussed going over some games. Did you have new games or old games? How do we want to do this?
I've got one that's from yesterday and then 2 old ones. So if you want to do the new one first or whatever you want to do.
Sure, let's do that. So, join channel Neuro W, like the emote.
Alright.
You're on the NA server, right?
Yeah. Let me launch the game.
Fire it up. But yeah, today was one of those tilting days where you're trying to weather the storm. It's not always candy canes and beer every day. As great as that would be.
Okay, I should be.
Oh, I'm not in the channel. That's my bad. There you go. Got him. Gotcha. Alright. Your leader promoted. Fire it up and give me lobby host and we'll get cracking. ZVT, ZVP, ZVZ. Platinum 3. Zerg versus Protoss. You said one of the games was a cannon rush. Is this the one?
No, that was one. That was. I figured we'd just play this one instead.
Cannon rushes are still pretty valid to go over.
Yeah, we can do that too. So this one, not a whole lot happens until around the 10-minute mark, and that's when I go to knock at his front door. And I think that's really where I screwed up. But
this is a map where your 2 to 3 base plan can fall on its face, where on certain other maps it could be very strong. So if you're looking at the layout, you get to defend 3 bases from 1 choke point, and then the 4th is pretty close to that. So attacks in the 3 base, like 2 to 3 base stage, are generally not going to be as good on other maps where the bases are more spread out, and you have to defend multiple locations. So if I could guess at it, that may be part of the issue.
yeah, it's certainly going down that choke point wasn't the best idea. I guess I was getting to the point that I've got a decent army and I feel like I need to do something with it. Maybe there's a lack of scouting, but yeah.
Kill the probe. Overlord. Droning up. Okay. So the first Overlord usually checks for the base and then goes to a high ground pedestal. So you go C.
Yeah, I don't think I pulled him back down after that.
I think sending it up is fine if you see no base, just to get a full scout. Oh my god. Okay, so this is a very different game now. Did you see that with your Overlord? You saw more gateways going down. So you know it's a 1 base setup. Building a spine. You have Ling Speed on the way. Rochewarren is probably going to be the most sturdy option for you here. Just for a nice gas unit to be able to defend stuff. And then if you think about the economy, if Protoss is going for a 1 base all-in, if you take 1.5 base of economy, and then you mass army, you should be in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, normally I wouldn't drop that spine, but as soon as I saw all that, I was like, this is where I might have issues, so I'm just going to put that down for safety.
I think keeping the Overlord at the natural is a good call here, because you don't know that they're expanding. So let's say if you see lack of expansion, keep Overlord there until opponent removes it, and or you see a base. Because that changes the dynamic of this match by quite a bit. They went for what should have been a huge gateway all-in, but now they're macroing off the back of it, which means your 14 Lings can deny their base. So this isn't a universal thing, but in general, if you have a bunch of speedlings, they should be running around doing something. They're the fastest unit in the game. Hydra is a good choice. Those are good units. So you're droning up, sending a thing to the 3rd. One thing that's pretty key is getting 16 workers in your mineral line. It's one of those...
Go ahead.
It's probably one of the most subtle but super important aspects of StarCraft 2. It's a little bit arbitrary, but just getting full value from your expansion, 16 out of 16, in terms of moving up leagues is very important. So the difference between your play here and, say, a Diamond 3 or even a Masters 3 play would just be 16 out of 16 in the main, 16 out of 16 in the natural with the 2 gases, and then an injected 3rd as soon as you get it.
So typically, you know, I'll work up my main, and then I'll just keep moving my rally point from base to base. Do you think maybe I guess that's maybe where I screw up, because as I start to create more, you know, production, that's what I'm using my drones for, and I never replace those drones because they just get sent down to the next base. Do you think it's best to leave that rally point set to those minerals at each base?
The method can vary a little bit. The thing that a lot of players don't do, because they're kind of worried about only hitting 16 and not exceeding that, is it's okay to overdrone a base a little bit, because if we do the math and you look at it, say you just have 8 eggs that you made into drones and you send them at a worker line, and that's going to put you at 24 out of 26 workers, which gives you a red number. People think they see red workers and that's a bad thing. But if you subtract 2 for the extractors, you're down to 22. And then if you fill each of the gases with 3 each, you're down to 16. So it's basically perfect. So hitting a big swell of drones at an expansion and then taking the gas and then filling them is going to be a really good approach for hitting a really high worker count fast.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that I don't really ever pay much attention to, and I try to wait to move that rally point once I am, I guess, in the red in the main, to know that I'll have enough to make up for what's going to be built. But
okay, so you've got your spores, you're getting your upgrades. You have double Evo. Yeah, so this is one of those matches where your opponent went for a very confusing and strange opening. And the best response is just going to be to beat them in the macro race. That's the essence of what a lot of your games are going to end up being. Like, you shouldn't be as worried about precision timings, because a lot of players do weird stuff like this where they take a ton of production but don't attack you. So you want to kind of get a sense of, is the opponent attacking me? Do I have the tools I need to defend? You have a great setup here. You have this Ling. If you moved it up a bit further, you would have tons of notice if they're going to attack you. So you can hit maybe 70 workers on this map and defend whatever. Yeah, you're super ahead right now. Super ahead. Hydras are good. They're a nice all-around unit. You took speed and then range. I think the order of the upgrades is less important than if you get both of them.
Do you typically prioritize one over the other, or is it situational?
Well, the Hydralisk is in a state where both of the upgrades are so powerful that you wouldn't really do anything with only one of the upgrades or none of them. Unless you're like doing a one base Nidus response or something. But in all the rest of the cases, you want to get both upgrades. But I would say, in general, every time you attack your opponent, take a base. And I'm going to put this in bold and red in the notes. Every time you do this, you get to count it as a moral victory. Because having a follow-up is a super important part of being a really dangerous and flexible player. If they don't have enough, they're dead anyway, and 300 minerals isn't going to do too much. So you do have a base here. That's good. Mm-hmm. You could even take 2.
Yeah, you know, a while ago I was doing pretty decent on this map, but as I've been getting further along, I just keep coming into more issues just because I get so caught up on that choke point and not... Yeah, I mean, it ends up waiting too long. Next thing you know, they've got 3 bases, and...
That's what we call a Broodlord map. This map, Eastwatch, and Neon Violet are all Broodlord maps where your usual big Hydra timings are just gonna, like we're gonna see here. If you run into the Colossus, it's gonna be very painful.
That's what's about to happen.
I'm gonna open the Units Lost tab. The Faint of Heart, turn away now. Ouch. Yeah, and a fundamental unit of the interaction between Protoss and Hydras. Hydras are primarily a unit that allows you to not die. And Ling Bane is a really good way to wound the Protoss. So you've got a couple options for ZVP for kind of advancing your goals. So one goal would be wound the Protoss and macro into Hive. Or 2, just rush Hive Tech and defend with Hydras. So option 1 looks something like Ling Bane attacks probes, Hydras defend, take Infestation Pit into Spire, plus Hive, into Greater Spire, into Broods. And that's like 7 to 10.
I think so typically I would usually have ran my first 2 overlords out, one at the natural and one down to the left of his main, and perhaps if I would have seen that his natural wasn't up yet, or then it did go up, I probably would have sent those lings, but you know.
Mm-hmm. If you wanted a good time to attack, we could speak more generally about ZVP and when a strong like power spike is for Zerg. Around 170 supply is a really good time, because if you think about Zerg and Protoss as races, they're asymmetrically balanced, right? Protoss units are objectively higher quality. They're also objectively more expensive, and they take longer to produce. So our strength as Zerg is our ability to produce stuff really fast, which means if we macro equally well against our opponent, we should hit 200 supply faster, and we should be able to hit our next 200 supply faster, but our units are going to be worse. So 170 supply is kind of a magic number for hitting a really nice timing, and you can build more army through the attack. And usually you should be building higher quality units than what you attacked with. So with a Hydra Bane attack, you'd want to be making like Corruptors to make Broodlords or Ultras or something, as opposed to teching down. So you've got your Hydra Bane. I would say this is not really in a good window for yourself. If you saw Colossi, Abduct is a hard counter to that. If they have no High Templar, and this opponent opened with like a semi-cheese into expand opening, so they don't really have gas to spare for a Templar Archives and then a bunch of High Templar. They're committed to Colossus tech, which means you can counter that with Vipers. And you're not in a rush either, because you're making money. You're making way more money than the opponent. Look at the income tab.
Yeah.
It's a kind of reverse way of thinking about how most people intuit StarCraft. They think about the game like, alright, I need to build something and then kill my opponent. But with the way that they lay out the maps and the way Defender's Advantage works, a lot of times you can create such a dangerous economy that grows so fast that your opponent is basically on the clock to stop you, because you're just going to spiral out of control, and then you can make army after army after army higher quality stuff than they can make. So you're not really obligated to attack them, especially if you're ahead. Like, you're 29 drones ahead. What a god. I put it in the notes, but if you time your hive and your spire at the same time, then you can immediately start your greater spire. When your hive is done. You're getting that 5th. When you get a new base, a good habit to develop is single spore, double spine. It's a way to DT and zealot proof your base.
On those ones that are further off like that?
Yeah, like your 4th base, your 5th base and stuff. This base is probably fine with the 2 spores, because you could kill Prism or whatever. So it would mainly be having spine spore here and here. Do you ever think about the tiers of the units? Like what tech tier?
Exactly how do you mean?
Well, if you look
in
at
terms of like comparison from race to race, or?
Yeah, also just your own. So a roach can be made at hatch tech, which is tier 1 for Zerg. Hydra has to be made at lair. What would you say Colossi are?
I would imagine that it's got to be the equivalent of me at lair, but I honestly I don't know much about the other races.
You would usually call it tier 3 because they're about the same cost.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
they're the same cost as an ultra, and you have to make a gateway, cyber, robo, and then have a robo facility. So it's quite a few buildings deep. So a way to kind of compare your army is try to figure out, all right, if they're making tier 3 units, then I can make tier 3 units a lot of the time. And as you're going for those attacks, like your first attack was Hydras and Banes, which is tier 2 and tier 1. So your next attack could be something like Ultra Hydra Viper. It's a really good composition you can do in basically every matchup. And that has tier 3 units with the Ultras and the Vipers, and then some Hydras for added DPS. You know you can mouse up in the top right for your worker count?
Yeah, I try to every once in a while, or if I'm not completely aware, I'll pop up there to see.
65 is pretty good. I wouldn't really get too upset about a 65 worker economy, especially at your level. But 70 would be a nice number that you can be content with up to GM. It just gives you a little bit more juice. For this situation, that would probably be the gases at your 5th. And then you can make some really fancy stuff. So yeah, a lot of these engagements are just not fully maxed fights where you feel like you want to fight, but the Colossus is a unit that's kind of a critical mass type of thing, where you shouldn't really engage Protoss unless you feel like you can change that critical mass count. Because they're happy to trade their Zealots and Stalkers and stuff. That's all crap. They just want to make sure their Immortal and Colossus count keeps snowballing. So cool. You're effectively dead here. So I feel like the additional analysis isn't super helpful. You could make Broods. I think Broodlord as a unit against Protoss is almost universally better. The only situation where Ultra is better than Brood is if they go super heavy into Stargate play. Against Stargate play, Ultras end up being super strong because they hard counter High Templar, which are natural supports of Skytoss. They hard counter most gateway units, and they absorb the interceptor damage from the carrier super effectively.
Is there like a recommended amount of overseers and things like that that I should be pulling with to make sure that I'm covered?
I like having around 2 to 3 just for a little bit of redundancy. You don't need to go bananas with it. If you have 1, then it's very easy to lose that. And a lot of Protoss players have the sense to realize when they have the weaker end of things, and then they'll specifically try to snipe your Overseer and then mass DTs. That's always a very upsetting situation for Zerg. Okay.
How do you want me to get you these other ones?
You could email them to me.
Okay.
I can fire them up. Fire them up. If you're interested, I could show you one of my ZVPs as well. Because you only have like 3 games total, right?
Yeah, unless you want it. I mean, I can throw that cannon one in there if you want to see it. It's pretty short.
Sure. We could tackle it, no problem. You get an hour, so it's as you like. Send into games. I had some good ZVPs yesterday in the tournament. There was one game when the Mass Oracle shows up and you just see it and you know, I'm gonna lose 30 drones. Okay, got your message.
Yeah, I think in part of it, you know, especially that match, I get put on my back foot and I just kind of scramble and didn't know exactly what to do, and then I just started making things to start throwing at them. And
this is ZVZ or ZVP Cannon Survival. Cannon rushing is a whole new world with the shield battery.
yeah, in all my experience so far, I just do so terrible at microing my drones to try and tackle it and defend against it. So I usually end up pulling back and just try to get to roaches and ravagers as quick as I can. And then on this one, I threw a hatch outside of his base, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I saw you do that once. And I was like, oh, I'll try that, but it didn't work out.
Yeah, a lot of it depends on the way that the momentum shifts. I used to recommend trying to stop it with drones every time, but with the gateway shield battery kind of meta, it's oftentimes impossible to stop with drones just because they invest so much. This one is... wow. Wow, nice. Oh god. Okay, so one thing that's a really good thing to note when these cannon rushes are happening is weighing their investment against the cost of a hatchery versus your option to expand on the map somewhere far from this and do a Queenling Nidus. So it's kind of like every pylon is 100 minerals. They've already spent 100 minerals for each pylon, that's 200. And then 2 probes on the map, which is 300 total. And then 3 cannons here. That's more than a hatch already on its own. That's 450. So none of this crap can defend this. So when I see this second round of cannons coming out, I can just be like, alright, that's fine. I'm gonna go take both of my gases, take a random base on the map, and then Nidus the crap out of you.
Yeah, typically, I think I fought for it a little bit longer in this, and then I realized how much money I had, and then, okay, it's time to do something rather than what I was doing. But
a couple tips here. If, let's say the cannon rush section, cannon rush, pool goes behind your mineral line, so it isn't threatened by new cannons. So where it's placed right now, they could potentially put a pylon up here, and then they could cannon your pool, which would suck ass. So you want to put it back behind your base where it's safe. You can't put stuff back there.
yeah, so actually, I don't know why I did it that game, but for 99% of the rest of my games, I've been doing that specifically. I guess mainly I've been doing it to protect against Hellion, but I just kind of got in the habit of doing it. I'm not sure why I put it there on that one.
And then the hatchery can be placed here, or here, or there. Just kind of having it randomly on the map, as opposed to in your own base. Because you really want a couple things. You want your queen out immediately, so you can get an inject and get your larva income going. And then you also want to hit your saturation in the main. So it seemed like this was a... I have, like you said, I have a bunch of minerals and you spend it. The idea is good, but the macro hatch is a very, very long-term investment. And in the short term, you could potentially just kill the opponent.
I think I remade my pool up there. I'm not sure, because I think I recognized that. Or...
yeah. That's good. I used to roach Queen Nidus, but I think Ling Queen Nidus is objectively better because it hits faster. And you can't really rely on beating this kind of push with Ravagers. Because better Protosses will add a Robo, and they'll make Immortals and Disruptors, and it's just all kinds of nasty. So this is a tough stuff situation. We're making Ravagers. Working on it. Chipping away at it.
Yeah, like I was saying, it's one of those times where, you know, you try your best, but you get in these situations where you just, everything's thrown out the window, and it's like, okay, I need to figure it out. What am I going to do?
Lair after your first queen. Say Ling speed. And I'll show you a Ling Nidus game after this, just so we get to see that in action. Nice, you killed the cannon. Working on the pylon. Oh, and there's no high ground vision. Awesome. Well, it seems like now you could pour your opponent a tall glass of fuck them up, you know? Okay, go Ravagers. Everyone. Go, go, go. Bring in a drone.
Yeah, I think, I don't remember if I pushed at this point, but there was a point there where, you know, I wasn't sure. I figured he would be a bit behind and I might be able to do it, but then I don't.
You should. I think I'll show you the Nidus response. It'll give you more of a clear plan that you can follow, but at the fundamental level, if you're hiring military personnel, you want them to be doing military things, not really standing around. So the Roach Ravager is very strong, and you had the army value lead by a huge margin, and then the Prism Immortal stuff comes out, and then it gets tough. So making units, you should send them almost universally. Wow, look at this fancy pants micro.
Yeah.
Astounding. Isn't the Prism just a joy? What a sight to behold. You've got a hidden base. It's right next to their base. Have you seen Lord of the Rings?
A few times.
Yeah, this is some Merry and Pippin Treebeard shit. The closer we are to danger, the further we are from harm. Oh no, the Protoss noticed.
Yeah, see that? I didn't think they'd notice it that quick, but they did.
Yeah. Yeah, conceptually, the safest spaces to take in a cannon rush scenario are the most extreme locations on the map, and those would be the furthest outside lanes. Because the most obvious way to play StarCraft is to just take the short rush path and just try and kill them when you have an army. Going around those areas is lower percentage. Sometimes they run around there, but the main constraint is time. It takes more time to clear areas over there as opposed to ones that are closer to your base. Nidus, Lings. What Zerg unit do you have that counters a prism?
Well,
That you have this game.
the Hydra or the Queen?
The Queen. Queens have 8 range against air.
Yeah, I think I heard you guys talking about that yesterday. I don't remember if that was before. Yeah, this was way before that, actually. And I guess I didn't realize the strengths of the Queen and how important they can be, especially in a Nidus in that kind of situation.
Yeah, one of my favorite ways to kind of learn about the strengths of certain units is to hear how the players of other races bitch. And there's been a lot of bitching about the range of the Queen. So it's kind of like, oh, I guess that's what I make against the Prism, because that's what they're complaining about.
It's so in like a normal game, if I get up to, 4 or 5 bases, or even at a 3 base, how many queens generally should I have?
7.
Okay.
7 queens. Queen management.
So I hear you talking about like the strengths of Zerg and the idea that we hit our strengths at our 3 base inject. And is it necessary that I have a queen at each hatch, or is it okay to have those extras, either creep spreading or just together to work as, along with the army or to defend?
You want to have 3 injecting, and they should be very disciplined about that job. And then you want to have 4 that are spreading creep and defending the prism and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Sometimes, and you could watch this in my stream, if I'm pulling all of my queens around, I'm not playing my best, because I know that you're not supposed to do that. It's usually when I feel flustered and pressured too much, but having those 3 queens injecting is really important. They nerfed our larva per inject from wings and hots to legacy. We only get 3 per inject now. We used to get 4. So missing injects is a big pooper scooper. You really want to make sure those injects are crisp. Having 1 empty custom game that you play before you start laddering, I think goes a super long way in terms of internalizing that rhythm. Because a lot of StarCraft is based on your opponent's movements and stuff happens all of a sudden, but the timer of the inject and the creep tumor is a predictable 30-second pattern. Mm-hmm. So if you just get a sense of how often those rounds are happening, you're more likely to remember that when shit hits the fan and it gets really
I feel pretty well in terms of hitting them at the right times, but I guess I put a queen at each base, and if I'm at 5 bases, I'll be injecting every one, and I typically have all of them hotkeyed to 1 hotkey, and or 1 control group, and I'll pull them in situations where they try to hit me in my main or something, and then that really throws me off. But
I show you how to slay a cannon rusher in 6 steps or less. Is this on EU? I thought this was on NA. Maybe it's not. Oh. No, it's on EU. Cannon rushing. CVT, ZVP. Perfect. That's the game I'm looking for. This was in a tournament. So cannon rush defense in 5 minutes or less. So you have that game you sent, and then there was also 2 ZVTs. Shitty. So I'll go fast with this. Time is money, friend. Forge. Hatch first. So the second Overlord flying over the 3rd base is nice. And then I always send a drone at around 20 supply past the back of my natural, and then I send it over to my 3rd. That drone catches this cannon rush stuff a lot of the time. So this is a little bit different from yours in that they invested very far away, which means that
after your pool and everything, or is that just after your hatch?
That was kind of while my hatch was building, but they're not shooting my hatch. This is a 1 base all in. So they're putting it at a very conservative location to make sure everything gets completed, and they create a really big obstacle to contain me. So we're Zerg, we're like water. If they're trying to build a dam to pent up the river, then we'll build a tunnel and we'll go through that into their main base. So Ling speed first 100 gas, lair after the first queen, making speedlings. Speedlings can catch some of those stalkers and immortals that harass you. And I took a hidden base on the map, just a random gold base, where I don't think they're gonna go. And then Unitas their main. Pretty straightforward. The faster this is, the better it's gonna be. Mainly because they have less time to invest in both offense and defense. So from here, the opponent is mostly dead, but a big part of it is just clicking into that Nidus counterplay as soon as you identify that they're spending way more than a base. Because they want the fight to be taken where all these cannons and shield batteries are. They don't want to have to go back home. That makes it complicated. And I think a lot of players will go for a cannon rush because they don't really like fancy stuff like hammer control. They just want to have one event that is very obvious where they can control stuff. So I'm mining for my second base, and then I'm going for Hydra range and Hydras. And the opponent is effectively dead from here. But the idea was just getting the Ling speed, getting the lair very fast, constant queen production, tight injects, and then Nidus the ever-loving shit out of him.
That drone that you checked the third with, are you doing that just in ZVP, or do you do that all the time?
I'm not checking the third, I was going to take the third.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
But yeah, I do a third base at 20 supply against Terran as well. Zerg, I take it at 31 supply.
What are your thoughts on me drone scouting? Is it something that I should be doing, or?
Drone scouting is a personal preference kind of thing. It depends a little bit on the map. Stuff like Acid Plant and Catalyst, your opponent is so close to you that you don't really get tons of value by sending the drone scout and also getting the overlord there. But I wouldn't stop you from drone scouting. It's not bad. It costs you mining time, but if it makes you feel more comfortable, you can do that.
Should I be using my second overlord, and should I jog him over a little bit to help scan, to help detect anything like that that's going to pop up? Because I think that's one of my issues, especially on the bigger maps, is, you know, I'll get hit by a cheese or something like that, and I had no idea it was coming because I rely so much on waiting for my overlord to get there to really get some intel.
Yeah, so the first overlord goes direct to opponent and sits on safe pedestal outside their natural. And then second overlord goes to the third, your third, then into opponent main. That path generally tends to catch almost all proxy on the map. So if you look at your base in this replay on Eastwatch, if you were to send it to this third base and then into their main, you would catch a lot of different proxy barracks locations that way. They usually expect you to send your overlords direct toward them. So I call my second overlord Francisco the Funny Business Overlord because he catches proxy gateway zealot, the one base cannon contain shit, and then proxy barracks marine or reaper. So I think with that scouting pattern being more consistent, the drone scout is less necessary because you fill most of the obvious proxy locations. You can respond to them in good time. So you're going to hatch your gas pool. What is your favorite unit composition against Terran?
I think Hydraling Bane has been something I've been trying to get better at using.
Hydraling Bane is really good. Can't really go wrong.
I don't remember if this is the mech or the bio game, but I really lack. I don't use Vipers enough. I don't really know how to use them effectively. And I think if this is the mech game, that's one of the reasons. I think that would have helped me a lot.
This one looks like bio with the double barracks medivac. They could still go mech. Okay, so scouting. Did you get a overload scout? Yeah, you did. Good job. Good job. So against this play is a classic ZVT build, double Medi Marine. And it was a build that has fallen out of favor some, but when I've been coaching people, it seems like in the mid and even the upper leagues, a lot of Terrans still do it very often. So a couple notes about this. You want to emphasize queens and drone until 4:30. So this is a bit of a different opening than a lot of the other ones from Terran. If they have Hellions, they can jam 2 Hellions into your drone line. They could jam 4 or 6 or 8. They have a lot of different opportunities to strike at you with Hellions, whereas with Marines, they're kind of crap until they get an upgrade, so Stim or Combat Shield, and they're not very mobile until they get the Medivac. So this is an opening that gives us a big timing window to drone super hard, and then create a really efficient defense, which allows us to get very ahead. Because if you're thinking about it, if you scouted this, and you did, you know that it's going to be double Medivac Marine, maybe some Hellbats, maybe. So you need queens and lings to defend that. The optimal defense is like 7 to 8 queens and 30 Zerglings, and then you can go back to droning. So just...
Yeah, I was going to say, so what is, I mean, it's not too often, at least at my level right now, that I get hit by, you know, Hellions, but is, you know, would against 4+ Hellions, if I have 3 or 4 queens, am I going to hold up okay with that?
Yeah, queens can beat Hellions very effectively. The issue is protecting your drones. So if you made...
Sorry, go ahead.
If you had 8 to 10 lings behind your queens, you can catch them from diving your drones, and you're basically safe. We'll say 4 minutes. 4 minutes is the time when you want to be on guard for Hellions. Hellion shove into natural.
Typically, I keep getting hit by that first Reaper, but I think this was one of my few games I haven't seen it in a while.
Yeah, the first Reaper, you just need 1 queen per base and 4 lings. And you want to make sure your lings are defending the drones and the queens as well. Chasing the Reaper is usually bad. But here, you have a lair, you have a Bane nest, you have Bane speed, you're getting upgrades, you have a Hydra den. So this attack could be fairly tough to deal with. Oh, they're splitting up their drops. That's going to work in your favor. Well, nice. Split up your defense. You have Hydras in the main. Lings at the natural. If you're thinking about the purpose of Hydras, it's a little bit different between versus Terran and versus Protoss. Versus Terran, Hydra is more of a very small number support unit that helps your Ling Bane kick ass and allows you to get into fast ultras. Against Protoss, you can mask the unit a bit more because it tends to hard counter more of Protoss's early to mid game arsenal and then eventually get into Broodlord. The upgrade investment is different as well. So it's not required, but most players will go double melee upgrades, so melee and Carapace, and then melee 2, Carapace 2. And they won't even really take Hydra upgrades. They'll just make 12 to 14 Hydras to get into Ultra Tech.
So yeah, typically in my Hydraling Bane, I've been hitting the ranged and the armor upgrades. Should I be prioritizing melee rather than the ranged in that, or?
I think if you want something that you can mostly do without scouting, you can say 1-1 ranged first for Hydras, and then melee 1 Carapace 2 after to move into ultras. Because against Terran, if you plan to macro and take 3 bases, the most logical ways to kill Terran involve Hive Tech units, so Ultraling Bane Corruptor or Broodlord Infestor, stuff like that is very, very difficult for Terran to deal with. Hydraling Bane is more of a stepping stone, so the upgrades you get aren't super decisive. It's usually going to be about, do you have enough units in the right place at the right time to defend?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I don't think about... I really struggle in the late game. I don't know if it's because I don't make it there enough, but I've never thought of Hydraling Bane as not being something that I should be carrying into the late game, and that I should, you know, I don't focus enough on teching once I get there.
Yeah, Hydraling Bane ends up kind of being trash once Terran gets either a critical mass of tanks or libs. And those are like the common transitions from bio. Is either they have a second factory making tanks, or they have a second starport making libs. In both cases, Hydraling Bane falls off really hard. And in addition to that, Hydraling Bane is a much better composition on creep than it is off creep. So you kind of want to phase that out. A good number of Hydras to make for ZVT is 14. So I'm going to recommend that. 14 Hydras while taking Infestation Pit, plus Hive, and then 3/3 Ultra Armor, Adrenal. The Orange Quartet, as Day 9 put it. But yeah, the faster you can get the Ultra transition online, the better. You should also think about Adrenalings as kind of an OP upgrade. When Legacy came out, there was some discussion about whether or not that was technically OP. It used to be 18% attack speed in HOTS, now it's 40. So Adrenalings deal a lot of damage.
Yeah, I think a lot, you know, especially ZVT, I recognized that I could be using Lings a lot more, and then I realized the weakness of having upgraded the ranged over the melee, and then I'm just way behind and wanting to get to that and that Ling upgrade.
But yeah, a good time to push Terran is with your Ultras. Whenever you have Chitinous and 3/3 and stuff, you can go Ultra Infester. Viper isn't... It's probably not as necessary as you think. Another thing that's an important relationship is that Ultra Corruptor is better than Roach Hydra. Or sorry, than Ultra Hydra, because of pathing. There are a lot of kind of unit blocking struggles that you have if you're making Ultra Hydra, because they're about the same movement speed. So you'll have engagements where your Hydras are in front of your Ultras and you can't really fix it because you're stuck in a choke or something.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
So yeah, phasing out the Hydras, kind of using them more as a stepping stone unit rather than a core unit. The Lingbane Queen is kind of your core. You have some Hydras to step into your Ultra Tech, and then if they're getting Ghost Lib, I would guess that you probably don't see Ghosts that much at this level.
No.
Yeah. If you did, just 5 Brood Lords and making mostly Lingbane is a pretty good way to counter that. But Ultra is going to be the simplest way to beat a lot of these Terran armies. I wouldn't even say Vipers are that necessary, because most Terran players won't be taking the attack upgrades as effectively as they should. And it's going to come more down to how you set up your engagements. I wouldn't even really call siege tanks a hard counter to Ultras. They're kind of a soft counter, where they're better than the bio units, but Ultras are still really difficult to kill. It takes probably like, what, 5 shots for a tank to kill an Ultra? And if it's fully upgraded, it might be 6. So a cool thing that you can click into as well is make a round of Queens when your Ultra Tech is ready, and pull your Queens with the army to transfuse. That's a really nice way to get some value if you miss some injects over the course of the game. Transfusing Ultras is a very, very powerful move. It basically doubles your Ultra HP if you do the math.
Okay.
But yeah, this game, definitely your economy management was not a weak point. You got 70 workers. It was just kind of clicking into the Ultras fast enough. And there doesn't really need to be hesitation of like, oh, they have tanks, I shouldn't make Ultras. No, they're still good. It's a tier 3 unit, so you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck with that. even if they're making some stuff like Thors or tanks or whatever. Dropping the Spire after your Orange Quartet is good. So you have the Ultra Armor 3/3 and Adrenal, and then dropping the Spire after that. Pretty cool. Pretty cool tech transition. Alright, you got one more ZVT. ZVT is a fun matchup. It's exciting.
Yeah, so I think this was my Met game, and I was super low on the drone count, but what I walked into, I think there was like 20 tanks or something like that, and it was game over at that point, but...
Ultras are good until Ghost comes out, says someone. Yeah, but the Ghosts can't channel their snipe if they're taking damage. So.
Is there good timing that I should be thinking of for my Hive and my Hive tech, or is it all situational? Because I think that's one of the things that, I mean, I guess it just sits in the back of my mind, and there's a lot of games that I don't even get it, I think, just because I push with Roach Hydra or Hydralink Bane and stuff like that.
So you start your infestation pit when you start making Hydras. That's the way you combine the step. And then you take your Hive as soon as your infestation pit is done. And you take your Ultra Cavern as soon as your Hive is done. So you always have that tech line running along.
Okay, okay.
Infestation pit goes down when Hydra production begins. Yeah, one of the things that people tend to describe when they're talking about their games and stuff is feeling like it's not safe to either expand or to tech up at current stages of the game. But when you stack the cost of, say, putting the next tech piece down against, do I need that much more army? 99% of the time you don't need that much more army. And the more powerful choice is to tech or to expand. ZVT. This map is a little bit different. It's very aggressive with how close the opponent is. So sometimes I'll go single Evo instead of double, just to have more units out earlier. It's not super required, but against Terran, usually you'll go Carapace if you're gonna go single Evo.
I think majority of the time I do typically go single Evo. Is it something that I should consider the double Evo more often, or?
Double Evo is really good against Terran in most cases because a lot of Terran builds involve taking double upgrades, so that just allows you to keep pace. Whereas Protoss generally only has one forge, and in ZVZ, one Evo is more common than two. So if you think about a double Evo style, a double Evo play doesn't really shine until 2-2. The difference between a single upgrade build and 1-1 is pretty small, but the difference between, say, a +2 attack build and 2-2 is quite large. And the reason for that is because of the supply at those stages of the game. So in the 1-1 stage, it's very rare for a player to be near maxed. But in 2-2, people are usually about to hit 200 supply, which means your upgrades are benefiting more units. So you get a lot more value from those upgrades the more supply you have in army.
Okay.
The Reaper stuff, it's kind of alarming how much value you lose if you lose a drone to early Reaper. I did the mental math, some napkin math for it. If you lose a drone to the first Reaper, it's about worth an Ultralisk and a half at the 15-minute mark. It's unfortunate. That's how,
to one drone?
To one drone, yeah, because you could do the math of how much resource that one drone would have mined for that period of time, and it's about an Ultra and a half. Drones are strong. Gotta be careful with them. Okay, so you're going Lair, Bane Nest, Evo, Roach, so this is a mech game. It's mech. Did you scout? You can see the gas at the natural and Hellions, which kind of tells you it's mech. Oh, and the floating barracks. Cool. Cool, cool. So you're pretty far behind in workers now. Wait, what?
Yeah, I think it stays that way for most of the game.
You're making roaches. I think you're worried about the Hellions more than you really need to be. So the neutral stance, I covered this with Kesnuts in one of his coaching sessions. It's not super obvious, but usually you want your fighting queens. I'll put this as a category, neutral stance. Your creep, fighting queens, anchor your newest base. So let's say you have 7 queens, you have 4 at your third, for example, and then your Ling, Roach, Bane, whatever, in the early game sits at your natural. Because it's kind of like you saw the Hellions, so it's like, shit, I need to defend Hellions, and you're like running back and forth. When, if you just have that solid resting stance where you have your queens, they can fight the Hellions at the third, and the Roach Ling prevents them from diving your natural in your main, you're good, and you can just go back to droning, and there's nothing really to worry about. You're getting Spore down a reasonable time. Sweet. Yep, spamming out those queens. Making queens on all your bases is good. A good exercise too is challenging yourself to try and hit 200 supply as fast as you can. Kind of doing it in empty games first, but also in your latter games just trying to race up to 200.
What do you think is the optimal drone count? 70 plus or?
70 is good. I wouldn't recommend more than 70 until you get into High Masters or something, because it becomes harder to spend the more economy you have and also harder to defend. 70 is good. Another checkpoint too is you should not make Hydras until you have 70 drones. That's a good benchmark. Okay, emphasize Queen and Drone. Till 430. This is the double Medi Marine stuff. Ultra Corruptor. What was that noise? Oh, Pact is playing Mass Effect in the other room. Maybe you hear that. Okay. Roach Hydra. Taking upgrades. Roach Hydra is very good. I'm polishing off those 16 workers. I've noticed this with some students who I coach where in certain scenarios they'll have the confidence to drone their bases really fast, but then against certain compositions they'll be hesitant with that. The economy growth shouldn't really change too much across the situations unless you specifically scout an all-in, but whether it's mech or bio, you want 70 like fast, real fast.
It's always, you know, in those situations where those Reapers didn't hurt that much, but I was just focusing so much on that, and then I feel like I anticipate more and I try to build more, and I'm not droning.
A bit of a simpler approach against mech than Roach Hydra Viper would probably be Roach Hydra Swarm Host, where you just make a bunch of Swarm Hosts. I put them on my Muta hotkey because they're kind of like a harassment finesse unit, and whenever you go in and take a fight, you throw your Locusts at them and then send in the Roach Hydra, and you fight with your Locusts until they're gone, and then you fall back. So it's a pretty standard and solid approach to the Zerg versus mech matchup. We dead from here.
Yep.
Super dead. But yeah, having some benchmarks for your droning. Say composition. compositions section. Burp. Getting fancy notes. Viewers cannot see these. You must be a student to get these dank notes. Okay, Ultra Corruptor is awesome. Awesome composition. It allows you to take really decisive fights. You don't have to be scared. And you can deal with basically any Terran composition with Ultra Corruptor. And that should be around 70 drone economy with 5 base. Let's say Roach Hydra is strong mid game with 60 to 70 drones and taking 4th base. Cool. Sweet options. So yeah, the inject uptime, hitting your drone counts, I think will give you a lot more options. You'll be able to build more stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It probably felt like a lot of those games are being pressured, but the units are less scary than you think. And because we have such good production as Zerg, if you have that stuff like Ling outside the base, which you did in the Backwater game, you see their army moving out, you say, all right, time to turn on the jets and mass a bunch of my best unit that I can make right now. And you can usually defend pretty well if you have a few buffer units. So let me give you some examples of some buffer army to just sit at home. In early game ZVT, that could be 5 roaches or 16 lings plus 4 banes. Stuff like that, where they have Hellions, you have 5 roaches. If you see the Hellions drive out and then some Cyclones, you say, all right, now I'm going to make Overlords and then more units. But aside from that, you're just droning really hard.
Okay, yeah, so I think that might, that's definitely one of my biggest problems is determining whether or not, should I be just focusing more on my macro, or, I'm trying to build some sort of army at the same time as I'm trying to drone, even though I don't really know what might be coming, and then like you said, they're just sitting there and they're not doing anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you should focus on the 16 workers per base, making that very, very crisp, and then teching up real fast. So getting into that hive tech kind of army, and it's not super hard to micro Ultra Corruptor. It's just a better quality stuff for its cost. I think that'll help with your efficiency a whole bunch. So
okay.
if we can boil all this down to, say, the 3 things that you need to work on, one of them would be having your tech moving along step by step. So as soon as one tech is coming online, you start the next one. And then another piece is hitting 16 workers on the mineral line. And then the next one is probably being aware of when to attack the opponent. And I would probably say 170 supply. That's your green light to consider hitting them and seeing what happens and remaxing behind that.
Against Terran as well?
All 3 matchups.
Okay.
170 is really nice because you can build units during the attack up to 200, and then you're going to be losing stuff but remaking, and that's really leveraging the production power of Zerg, because that's our key strength, is production.
Okay.
And that's twofold. We hit 70 workers faster than the other races, and we hit 200 supply faster. So this is all kind of like just playing Zerg effectively by utilizing that strength. Seems good. Seems good. Constant tech running. 2 is 16 workers on mins. It's up to 70. And then 3. Let's set the supply before attacking. And remax with higher tech. Awesome. I didn't check the time when we started. Oh, Discord link 1 hour ago. Sweet. Did you have any more questions?
No, I think I've got a lot to take in and work on.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for supporting the stream, dude.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah, go kick some ass. If you die to stuff, don't worry about it. We can cover that in the next one, or on a Saturday when we do the casting and analysis.
Okay.
But you should drone like you're making a problem for the opponent to solve, like it's dangerous.
All right.
See you, dude. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Nice. Great coaching. Put this on YouTube, please. It's nice of you to say, Bacane.